let's talk about the functions of stage lighting. So I'm not going to ask for a bunch of participants on this because it's just going to be too cumbersome. So these are hopefully things, if you've taken a lighting design course or any kind of basic lighting design course before, you know. Some of you, this might be first time, that's fine. So the number one function of a stage lighting designer or using stage lighting is to provide selected visibility to our stage, right? It's what we can see, but just as importantly, things that we can't see. So as a lighting designer, we are directing the audience's eye where to look. I'm telling you, I want you to look here, but I don't want you to look over here. The next thing would be setting a mood, setting an atmosphere. The first person who spoke up kind of touched on this a little bit as well. You know, if we want the mood to be really creepy and scary, we can accomplish that, or we can create the complete opposite of that. Next one is revelation of form. So this is revelation of the form of both the body and the scenery, creating depth on stage, showing shadows, showing angles, things like that. Reinforcement. So this is time of day, location, climate. Kind of, you could even loop this back into mood a little bit, but it's basically reinforcing that story that we're trying to tell and making it feel real on stage for the audience. And the last one that I love, and this is kind of my favorite one, is punctuation. We're going to talk about this a little bit in depth in a second. Punctuation you can kind of think of as literally punctuation marks on a sentence. Think about that for a second. We'll come back to it. So let's look at selected visibility first. So like I said, selected visibility is equal parts what we do see and also what we don't see. So the photo you're seeing right now is from a production of a show called Wakey Wakey that I did down in Sarasota about 2 years ago now. It was a one-person show, and this was actually the very first cue in the show. So a very tight light, I think this was actually an IQ on a luster unit with an iris, just pops on in 0 seconds. And so very clearly telling the audience, this is where I want you to look, don't look at anything else on this stage, right? It's very definition of this is what I want you to see, this is what I don't want you to see. This next photo is from South Pacific. So this one is doing the same thing, but it's doing it in a little bit more of an interesting way. So instead of just having that light on the person, I now have added a little bit of color to it, and I've added a little bit of angle to it. So in the background, you can see these soldiers that are back there. You know, they're lit, but they're lit from different angles. They're lit with a different color. So we've kind of created that depth to pull our lead here out from the background. Here's another example of that, again, adding it a little step further. So in this previous one, there's some darkness on stage. You know, there's some places that are not lit, but pretty much in this photo, everything is lit in some way. But now we're using color as well as angle to start kind of pulling that focus a little bit more. You know, the big difference in these two, and this photo doesn't necessarily do it justice because the color is a little not great in it, but she's lit with a follow spot. She's lit from the front. So you can see she's clearly the focus. Even though these other girls here are lit, the angle has changed, and now I just by changing that angle, I'm able to pull focus to the person I want the audience to see. And then finally, for selected visibility, this is the production that I just did down, actually the last one before the quarantine, down in Atlanta. And this again is doing the same thing, but now we've added another thing into it. We've added some texture to it. We've added some haze to the air as well. So I've got three groups of people on stage that I clearly want visible, but I want my audience to focus on one of them. So I'm doing that, again, just by putting some light on some people, but stronger light or front light on these people down left over here. Okay. So the next thing is setting a mood or setting an atmosphere. So what I'm going to do, this is one that does require a little bit of participation. So I'm going to show a couple of photos from a couple of shows that I've done. And using the chat feature here, because it's going to be a little bit easier than trying to everybody speak up, what I want you to do is the first emotion or mood that you see when you see the photo, just type it in there. And don't look at other people, just type them in and see what happens. All right, here comes the first one. Ooh. So we got suspense, mysterious, warm so far. Showbiz. I could see that, yeah. Great. So hopefully you're seeing all these that are coming in. And what you'll probably notice about them is that almost all of them so far are exactly kind of the same feel, kind of the same tone. But when you look at it, there's only really a couple of lights on that are doing that. So how are we accomplishing that? We're accomplishing that by the angle the light is coming from, as well as the color that the light is. So that angle is, she's backlit. We're not seeing her face at all. So it's creating that ominous, that mysterious feeling that people are or the suspenseful feeling that people are sharing right now. Again, very simply. All right, here's another one. Maybe a similar theme. So far we've had dark, suspense, anger, mystery, scary, wilderness. I like that. That's maybe the stick there. Angry, evil, suspicious. So again, all of these things kind of have a similar connotation to them. And we've accomplished that by really, again, this is a pretty simple cue. We've got a footlight on, and you can see a little bit of a highlight over his shoulders here. This was another one-person show that I did a few years ago. And we've created all of those things all of those reactions that you're having to this photo. You're having them because of that very simple lighting, that uplight, that little bit of a backlight, and that's it. There's another photo of this show, if you look on my website, where he did almost an entire scene that was basically candle lit. So he held an actual candle very close to his face, and the audience was very close to him, and it kind of created this exact same feeling, this exact same mood. All right, here's a different one. This is from Spring Awakening. We've got excited, excitement, action, animated, tense, energy, energetic, nervous, energetic. So again, same thing, right? We're feeling that stuff. Why are we feeling that? Like where is that coming from? I think to me, it's because of that color. Again, this is kind of doing that visibility thing that we talked about before. Our lead here, I'm pointing at my screen like you can see it. Our lead here is very front lit. We see him very clearly. And then in the background, everybody is still lit, but they're all lit in that very saturated red. So maybe there's an anger to it. There's a little bit of drama to it. There's a little bit of a blue backlight on him as well that, depending on the quality of the stream, you might be able to see. And then we also, it's Spring Awakening. So we have some exposed light bulbs back there that are all kind of an amber orange color. Again, all of those relatively simple things coming together to create these moods, these atmospheres that you've all pointed out so far. All right, I've got one more. Hopefully you can see this one on your screens. Cold, I like that. I've kind of had a similar, I should probably put some happier photos in some of these in this presentation. So yeah, so these, again, all kind of the same: isolation, loneliness, sadness, power. I kind of like that one too. That isolation, again, we're creating all of those feelings just by this single light that is lighting her. This is from a production of 42nd Street. This was actually the very first show that my team and I did at City Springs down in Atlanta. And quick little story about this particular moment. So this, you kind of see in the photo, there's a scrim, and she's lit behind the scrim. On the first dress rehearsal, the light came on and she wasn't in it. She had missed her mark. She was a little farther upstage of it. And so as she started to sing, she slowly walked into that light. And if you can picture that happening, you've got a cone of light, right? So it started at her feet and slowly worked its way up her body until it revealed her face. And it looked so cool that we ended up keeping it in the show, because it created, again, all those things you're talking about, like this loneliness, this mystery, this longing. Just by that extra little action, we were able to create that. So it was pretty cool. Okay, so that's it for mood and atmosphere. Moving on then, revelation of form. So this is from a production of Hairspray that we did. Again, kind of similar to some of the other photos I've shown, but it's very backlit. We're seeing the form of people's bodies. We don't necessarily care about seeing faces. We want to really just we want to, again, see those moods, see those emotions. A great example of revelation of form is with dance lighting. So I don't know if any of you work in dance. I don't do a lot of dance anymore, but I have a couple of friends who do a lot of it. And dance is all about revelation of form, right? So we've got a lot of side light, we've got a lot of saturated color, stuff like that. Because in theater, we're trying to light people's faces versus in dance, where we're trying to light the body. That's kind of a general rule. Even though a lot of times I don't like to light people's faces, but. All right, here's another one for form. So this one, this kind of talks about depth a little bit, I think. So in this show, this is a production of The Birds. If you're not familiar with The Birds, it's a play that takes place in a post-apocalyptic, hopefully not happening anytime soon, given the current circumstances, world, where instead of a virus, it's birds have taken over the world, similar to the novel and to the movie. And the birds attack people when they're out. So these three people kind of get quarantined in a house together to escape from the birds, and then the two young ones fall in love, and the older one kind of feels left out from that. So this is the end of Act 1. You can see them kind of in this downlight here, this gobo as they're dancing, and the other character is walking up the stairs kind of into a shaft of light. And this stage was this is probably no more than maybe 12, 15 feet apart, but by isolating that lighting a little bit and by having these angles and that the gobo and things like that, we're able to create a lot of distance between those people. So that distance both metaphorically and physically. Like if you don't see the space in between them, it becomes harder to judge that distance that's there. And then the second to last one's reinforcement. So this can be very literal. So this is a picture from a show I did down in Sarasota a long time ago, where it was just an interior of a house. This was a production of The Roommate. You know, you can see there was a psych out back where there was trees back there. We made it look like a real sky. We had practicals. We had practical lamps inside the house. The stove worked, the fridge worked. The idea of this was realism. And so that's what we were trying to reinforce. Similar thing here with a production I did in Colorado last year. This took place in a garage. It was a brand new show. The whole thing took place in a garage, so we had this little work light. There were some fluorescent lights up in the ceiling. This was at night. The main character got very drunk and was hanging out in the garage, and, you know, we wanted that realism. The cool part about this show was that it also had this whole other surrealistic world to it. So thinking about Spring Awakening or something like that, where you've got these, like the song world and the show world, this was very similar. So this photo is from the very same set, very same show, like 2 minutes later. You can see we had LED tape on all the walls. The fluorescent lights that we had above were actually LED tape on the back of fluorescent tubes, so we can make them look like they were fluorescent. And then going back again, you see like, it looks like drywall. Oops, it looks like drywall in the back here. If I enlarge it a little bit, you can probably see that a little bit better. Looks like drywall, but it's actually like a frosted visqueen surface that was stretched across the whole thing. And then I had a bunch of LEDs behind it that could light it up. So yeah, so creating two very different things, but still reinforcing the realism and also reinforcing what the play needs. And then one last one for reinforcement. This is another one from that production of The Birds that I showed you on the stairs earlier. And this show kind of had an interesting thing about it, and that was that, I mean, again, it's post-apocalyptic, so there's no electricity, right? The whole show is lit basically by the light coming in through the windows or the candles that the cast would light. So the candles you see on the mantle and stuff in the back, those were all actually little pieces of LED tape that we put on that would flicker at like between 1% and 4% or something like that. I have some pictures of that on my Instagram you can check out. The one down in the front here, this was just battery powered because it was a last minute ad. But the challenge with that, with a kind of a large house, was how do we light this show in a realistic way, as realistic as you can, when the whole thing is supposed to be candlelit or light coming through windows. So the light coming through windows thing, that's a lot easier. You know, you've got window gobos, you've got actual light coming in through the windows. Those are easy things to accomplish. The candle light was a little bit harder. So what we ended up doing is we put two color, were the color source bars? I think they might have been D60s or D40s or something, kind of in a shin kicker position. So if you look at these people and the way they're lit, you can see that they're definitely uplit. And that was kind of, those two LEDs became our key sources of light for almost the entire show. You can see the shadows on the wall and stuff like that. And so, you know, you start to ask that question then, okay, is it necessarily realistic? Because where is that light coming from in real life? But when they have the candles and they're walking around, the audience accepts that, okay, it's candlelight, okay, it's creepy. We can kind of bridge that surrealism with the realism a little bit and accomplish the reinforcement that we need. So this show, it was really cool. We did a lot of really cool stuff with it. I'm very proud of that. Okay, and then the last function of stage light we'll talk about is punctuation. So this one is a little bit harder of a concept because it's not quite so tangible to look at pictures of. I've got a couple of little video examples here to show. punctuation is literally think of it as punctuation marks. So a lot of the work I do is in musical theater, and a lot of the lighting that I do is musical based. So even when I'm doing a play, I like to think of my lighting kind of as an instrument in the score, or another voice in the chorus or something like that. So oftentimes I'll follow like a melody line, or I'll find like a violin part in the back that looks really cool. Maybe it has a crescendo, and I'll do something with that. All of those cues that you're making, especially when you're dealing with music, can have a punctuation mark associated with them. So a very obvious example of that is this. So this right here, this is a simple fade out, fading from full to zero. That's a period, right? Kind of going out relatively quickly, but not snapping out. On the other hand, something like this, where everything snaps out, that's kind of an exclamation point. Or the opposite of that, if let's say the end of a big rock song, you've got a big bright flash at the end, which we call a button, that's an exclamation point, right? So we can start, if you start thinking about the cues you're making in your songs and you start assigning that punctuation to them, it helps you to kind of see the overall flow of the sentence, or see the overall flow of that particular song. Maybe a 5 or 6 second fade from one color to another is, maybe that's an ellipsis, maybe it's a question mark. There's not really other than maybe the exclamation point, there's not necessarily here's an exact definition for you, but hopefully you get the idea of that. So that you just saw, I don't know if you could hear it or not, hopefully you could, is another example of kind of a punctuation moment. This is like a lot of exclamation points all being thrown at your face at the same time. This was from the ending of Act 1 of Billy Elliot that we did last year in Atlanta. And the whole idea of this is like, Billy is so angry. The song is called Angry Dance, and he goes through this whole thing, and this is like the big climax of his anger at the end of Act 1. And I think we had, there were probably 30 or so moving profile units, as well as wash lights. All of the profile units all went to open white, all down center, and did a random strobe that kept getting faster and faster. It was really cool. So again, a whole bunch of exclamation points kind of hitting him in the face at once. Okay,